Thanks everybody for coming. We're going to hear now from Andrew Wolfenson and his new book, In His Own Defense.
Thank you everybody for coming out. Even though it's snowing outside, I'm hoping that will end and we'll return to normal March weather as we head into April. Happy early St. Patrick's Day for everybody, and whoever lives in Metuchen, congratulations on the St. Joe's basketball team making the state finals. I saw on the paper today. Now, I've done a few book signings. I haven't done a reading yet, so let's see how this works out. Hopefully it'll be okay.
We're a nice crowd.
I hope you are. Well, first up, I actually pulled out my horoscope this morning. And my horoscope says, share your talent. Because you have a wonderful eye and a gift for creative interpretation, you make people pay attention to the glorious details all around us. Let's see if that's true as I read the book. And I guess what I'll do, if it's okay with everybody, is I'm going to read chapter 1, we'll start, and then we'll stop and do questions, if that's okay. All right, so chapter 1 starts with a quote from the American Bar Association, Canons of Professional Ethics, paragraph 37. It is the duty of a lawyer to preserve his client's confidences. This duty outlasts the lawyer's employment and extends as well to his employees. Tell me the truth. Do I really need an attorney to do this, or can I do it myself? Asked the man in the brown leather chair. He leaned forward, yellow legal pad perched on his knee, and twisted a pen between the thumb and forefinger of his right hand. His glasses fell slightly to the tip of his nose, and he waited for an answer from the man seated behind the desk. Eric Goldberg took a deep breath and, trying to collect his thoughts, looked intently at the fidgeting man. The conversation between the two men had been ongoing for over 40 minutes now, most of which were taken up by the man, whose name Eric could not even remember, talking about how much he wanted to get a divorce from his cheating wife. This question, however, was never a good signal. It was the first question usually raised by the person who was merely looking for advice as to how he could act as his own lawyer, as seeming to Eric that he had now wasted the last 40 minutes of his life. He looked at the wall behind the man, focusing on the diplomas which bore his name, which now looked yellowed with time. The diplomas reminded him of a time long ago when he first graduated from law school and looked forward to a fulfilling and exciting career in the law. Those hopes, however, had long ago been dashed, and he was now relegated to meeting with moochers who wanted to take his knowledge and advice without any real thought of compensating him for his time. Well, he began after a deep sigh, I can't say for sure you need an attorney for your divorce, but... I mean, it should be a simple case, right? The man interrupted. She will keep the kids. You told me that child support is set by the court, and we do not have anything like a house to worry about, so why would I need an attorney? The clock at Eric's desk read 6:24 p.m. Eric looked down at his shirt, wrinkled from his 11-hour workday, and at the striped tie which fell slightly to the left of his slightly too large stomach. A half cup of cold coffee stood next to the clock, where it had been sitting since noon. Eric reached for the cup, took a deep gulp of cold coffee, and replied, slowly and deliberately, my belief is you should always have legal representation for things of a legal nature, like divorces, because attorneys know the laws, they know the procedures, and they know the judges. He looked at the man, who was furiously scribbling notes on his legal pad. If a person tries to handle things themselves and messes up on the procedure, it could prove to be a problem in the actual divorce, or more importantly, thereafter, especially when money and children are involved. You must remember, the divorce does not completely end your relationship with your wife, and you have to make sure that all the future possibilities are taken care of now. He placed the coffee cup back on its desk, slightly to the left of the sticky ring left by coffee cups past. The man stopped writing. He thumbed through his notes and looked at some papers that he had put into a folder in anticipation of that evening's meeting. After a brief pause, he pulled out the printout of the internet page where he had found Eric's address and phone number. Staring at that page, he asked, so, if I were to retain your services for my divorce, what exactly is it you would do for me again? Seriously, Eric thought as he strained his eyes to see exactly what the man was reading. What had they been discussing since 5:40 that afternoon? This was one of the worst parts of his job, he lamented. The late meetings were not a problem when they led to money. The late meetings that were a waste of time were a different story. Not that he had to run home, mind you. The apartment was quiet. Since his divorce had been finalized, things were much different. He used to go home, usually late, and see his wife and son, Jason. Now his commute was only 5 minutes from the office, and the only activity in his apartment was his dog and Jason when he decided to come home instead of staying out until all hours with his friends from community college. His wife still lived in his old house, the house that he could no longer enter, and which he only saw on occasion when retrieving old files that were still stored in its attic. He glanced down at the calendar on his desk, searching quickly for the man's name. "Let's start again from the beginning, Steve," he said slowly. "The first step is filing the complaint for divorce. We prepare the complaint based on the information that you give to me. Then we sign it and send it to the court to be filed. Once we have it back from the court, we then serve the complaint on your wife." He paused, noting that Steve had again begun to scribble furiously on his notepad. After a few seconds, Steve, without looking up from his notepad in a mid-scribble, asked, "And what exactly does the complaint say?" "There are several parts to the complaint, including various certifications that you will have to sign. I will need for you to give me a bunch of information about yourself, your wife, kids, date of marriage, stuff like that. And I take all the information, put it into the proper format, and then you come back to sign the complaint so we can file it with the court." "The proper format," Steve replied. "What exactly is the proper format?" The tip of his pen sat on the legal pad, his right hand quivering slightly as he prepared to write. Now Eric knew for sure. There was no way that Steve Sanderson was retaining him to represent him in his divorce matter. Steve Sanderson's goal now was to get as much information as he could from Eric, then prepare the papers himself. Eric had been down this road before, and he was determined not to let it happen again. "The proper format is the format that the court needs in order to comply with the statute and allow you to get divorced," Eric replied, as he looked to his right, out the window of his office. It was starting to get dark outside, unexpected on this mid-June day, and Eric suspected that the rains that had been predicted on the news that morning were about to erupt. "I will show you after we prepare the complaint." "Do you have someone else's you can show me now?" Steve asked, "or a template that you can use so that I know what information you need? That way I can tell you exactly what you will need and can get you whatever papers you want as soon as possible." He put his pen down on the edge of Eric's desk and extended his right hand as if to receive the gift of papers to review. Eric, however, did not lean forward to the man to hand him any papers. In fact, he recoiled slightly, again scanning the diplomas hanging behind the man's head and outstretched arm. The Rutgers University diploma loomed behind and to the left of the man's head, bearing the year 1993. To its right, its bottom half obscured, was the diploma from Seton Hall University School of Law, a regal-looking paper which contained the year 1996. The diplomas, and the promise they once represented, now mocked him. Perhaps appropriately for his mood, he could hear the ominous rumble of thunder outside as the skies grew ever darker, as the sound of the thunder obscured the traffic noise from Broad Street below. "No, I don't," Eric replied, as the clock changed to 6:29. He shifted forward in his chair, the creaking of its movement joining with the sound of the door opening and closing in the outside office. Eric could now hear the rain striking the window to his right. He looked at the window, which bore the marks of pelting raindrops, making Eric wonder when the rain had begun and why he had not noticed it until now. "I don't have a copy to show you, and I'm not going to tell you the exact format so you can do it yourself," he said, softly, almost inaudibly. He straightened his back and said, in a more appropriate tone and volume of voice, "And I don't mean to be rude, but I think that my next client just walked in. Are you going to retain me to represent you or not?" The man in the leather chair seemed surprised by the question. "I'm sorry," he gasped, "but I don't think that I like your attitude." He placed the cap back in its pen and reached down for the folder at his feet. "That question is pressuring me, and I don't think that is right. I was going to ask you to be my lawyer, but now I don't think that I will," he said, taking the pad off his knee and shoving it into the folder. "That's not very professional." Eric stared into the man's eyes. "With all due respect, sir," he answered, "you and I both know you weren't intending to work with me beyond this meeting. You came here looking for information. I never saw you reach for a checkbook. You never offered to sign an agreement." His voice growing louder, he snarled, "So don't lie to me and tell me that my attitude is bad. I deserve better. You want a professional? Show some respect." The man was speechless, and a little nervous of what Eric might do next based on his tone of voice. He rose from his seat, hesitantly, folder tucked under his right armpit, and turned toward the door. "Good luck with the divorce," Eric said as the man walked out the door. Silently, "Don't screw it up." He knew that the last comment was, in fact, unprofessional and improper. At this point, however, he was fuming not only at the man, but the situation. It was after 6:30. Most people were already done with their workday. He had been at his desk since 7:30 that morning, dealing with other people's problems. The guy complained that his wife was cheating on him. Eric thought of his own ex-wife. Perhaps that was the reason she had cheated on him, because of all the late nights at the office. They had never really discussed the reasons for her infidelity, but he assumed that it was the many nights that she was forced to spend alone. The nights when he would not return to the house until after 10 o'clock, most of which were caused by his insistence on working late. The work would be there tomorrow, as she pleaded with him, but he did not listen to her, nor did he even see the signs of her discontent until it was too late. Even when he was home, he was often too preoccupied with work, or the bottles of beer that inhabited his refrigerator, the beers that helped him to forget that he was still not spending proper time with his wife, or hearing her pleas to work on their marriage. He spent many nights listening to others talk about the problems in their marriages, yet never took the time to appreciate the difficulties lurking within his until the date that he was served with a divorce complaint. The papers bore a format with which he was all too familiar, and when he was served with them, he took them numbly, as if they were just papers for another client. The man walked out of Eric's office. He heard the man whisper something to the person in the adjacent room, and then heard the door slam as he exited the office. Eric knew that he would never see Steve Sanderson again, and that was fine with him. "I'll be out in a second," he called to the person whom he hoped was still waiting in the other room. He stood and peered out the window. The rain was intensifying, and the sky was a dark black. The streetlights cast an eerie glow about the buildings along Broad Street in downtown Elizabeth, including the courthouse which stood to its left. The sight of the courthouse mocked him. Behind it lay a prison where the underbelly of Union County resided. To him, however, both his office and the courthouse, its rotunda lit up in the rainy night sky, were his prisons. Perhaps he would see Steve Sanderson there one day, desperately trying to obtain a divorce on his own, even though he had filed papers incorrectly. He would see Sanderson in the courtroom, being berated by a judge for failing to file a required document, and hear the judge tell the cheap bastard that he should retain counsel to do things properly. That would also be okay. Eric probably wouldn't recognize him anyway. Steve was just one of the many people who came in and out of his office. There was no way that he could remember them all. Most he did not even want to remember. So that's the beginning of In His Own Defense. In His Own Defense tells the story of Eric Goldberg, an attorney who, as you can glean from the first paragraph, is divorced, works very long hours, and is, in a word, miserable. As we read on, we learn he does not like his life one bit. And he sets out on a path where he tries to fix that, and inadvertently sets himself into a worse situation that he has to then extricate himself from. Ends up going to Brazil, trying to solve his problems, and I guess I should let you read it to find out what really happens. Any questions?
What is your story?
What is my story?
I mean, how did you write this book?
The genesis of the story was the following. I was reading the newspaper one day, and I saw an article about a person who had died in a car accident on a rainy roadway, like is outside now. And it talked about a person dying and leaving behind children. And in the book, what happens is a client of his accuses him of doing the same thing to her husband, which he didn't do, as you know. And from that, and the fact that when we talk, especially with divorce clients, we talk, and people joke all the time about how their spouses are worth more dead than alive. My wife says it all the time about me, that I have more insurance than I earn, and therefore, you know, if I were to go, she'd have more money. So those two factors together, the discussion about the insurance money and then seeing the newspaper, was the genesis for the story. And the reason for Brazil is that my assistant is from Brazil, and she was therefore able to help me out with some of the local flavor that I use in the book, as well as I use a lot of Portuguese in the book as well, and she was able to help me do the translations for that, because I, despite my efforts, do not speak Portuguese at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
I had to laugh at something that you said about the person trying to get free legal advice. I had a class in interior design, kitchen design, and the designer said that she had clients that would come in with pads and they'd be writing under the table, and they weren't going to ever use her. They were sneaking her advice out. I never thought about that, you know, happening to a lawyer too.
Well, I keep telling people this is not autobiographical, because if it were, I would be divorced now, obviously. But there are certain parts of the book that mirror the events in my life,
Uh-huh.
to be fair. As I like to say, he's from New Jersey, this character, as am I, I'm, lifelong New Jersey resident. He's a big Yankees fan in the book, as am I. He's an attorney, divorces, as do I. What I just read you about the person seeking legal advice happens all the time.
Uh-huh.
In fact, another attorney with whom I do a lot of dealings, and I've had a couple of cases with, accused me of stealing his life and said, "Wait a minute, how did you know this happens to me all the time?" Because it does.
Uh-huh.
And the part about the would-be client being indignant about it actually did happen to me once. I had a couple come in once looking for advice on a landlord-tenant matter, and I hate doing landlord-tenant work because it takes so much time, and you never get compensated properly because you're back and forth with court, and if you're a landlord's attorney, it almost never works out the way you want it to because the courts are very skewed toward tenants. So this couple came in, and I tried to just tell them what to do. Rather than say, pay me, I said, do this, this is something you can do, and take care of things. And 6 months later, a couple comes in with a landlord-tenant problem, and I didn't even recognize them at first. But as we're talking, I realized I'd met them before. And they even said, you told us to do certain things, and it didn't work out. What else can we do? And we're talking a little bit, and now I'm thinking to myself, all right, this is the second time. I can't do this again. I have to get paid something. So I start talking about when we go to court, when we do this, and starting the colloquial we as opposed to you, as if to imply you're going to retain me or you're not going to get information out of me this time. And their questions are still, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm trying to get information out of them, and I'm trying to take a couple of notes so that I can then say to them, this is what we should do and how we should go work it. And after a few minutes, it became apparent that wasn't going to happen. And I basically said, are you going to retain me to represent you or not? I'll tell you what, I'll walk out of the room for 2 minutes, you two talk amongst yourselves, and then I'll come back in and we'll discuss where we're going to go with this. So I walk out of the room and I say to my secretary, here we go again. I'll go back in, they'll say no, they'll walk out, at least then we'll be done with it. But I don't want to spend another half an hour talking to them. So I go back in the room, and again I hear, like he heard, so if we retain you, what is it you're going to do for us? And I said, nicely, the first time, well, we've been talking about this already. This is what we can do, and this is how the whole process could work and what we can do, without giving specifics as to the court process itself, because then I'm tipping my hand again. And again, they asked me the same thing. And I finally said, you know what? We're done. I said, clearly you have no intention of retaining me. I think this meeting is done. And the woman said, I am offended by what you just said. I said, really? She said, yes, I am offended at your tone. I said, look, I'm offended by your tone also. So are you. Why don't we wipe the slate clean, start over. You came in, you're looking for an attorney, I can be the attorney, let's handle the case, let's do a retainer agreement, and we'll move forward. She said, no, I'm so offended, I'm not going to use you as my attorney now. I can't get past it. I said, okay, and why don't you guys get up and walk out of my office then? But before we do, one more question. I said, no more questions. So it's something we deal with all the time. And there are times when people will come in and I'll voluntarily offer information or opinions rather than charge them, because I don't feel it's right to charge people for everything I do if it's a simple thing they can handle themselves. But when they come in under the guise of they're going to retain me, that's when I sometimes have to get my guard up and say, it doesn't work that way. So that part is very autobiographical for any attorney.
Who did you use for the model of the book?
The book cover? The book cover was actually drawn by a different person. It's supposed to be the woman in the story. I gave her basic parameters of clothing, basically, and said, this is what I want you to draw, and she looks something like this, and this is what she drew. As I was writing the book, the description of the woman was based on a woman I met years ago in my office, who told a different and much more lurid story that I won't share today because children are in the room. So that was in my head as I was doing it, and it just evolved from there. So there's no official model other than people over time. And again, if this one was in my office every day, I wouldn't be married anymore. So.
Andrew, is there maybe a little bit of a chapter that you can read when you're down in Brazil to give us a little flavor as to what's going on?
Probably could. Put my fake glasses back on. While I'm looking, anybody have any other questions? So we don't have dead space. Okay. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to read some parts that are in Portuguese. I'm going to stumble over pronunciations, but just bear with me as I do that. You'll get the local flair from that. Now, at this point, he's already in Brazil, and he has met two people who are going to help him. A man named Steve and his girlfriend, Letitia. So as I say the names, you'll know who these people are. Steve arrived home from work, as promised, a little after meio-dia, which is he found Letitia and Eric huddled over the kitchen table, which was covered with pages from that day's Folha de São Paulo, the daily newspaper, as well as magazines trumpeting the nightly events taking place all over São Paulo. Looks like you guys have been busy, Steve said as he walked into the kitchen. Kissed Letitia and, spying the open bottle of wine on the counter, reached into the cupboard, poured himself a glass, and sat down. What are you looking at? We were trying to figure out the hot spots, where people will be tonight and tomorrow night, to try to find a woman who, as we said last night, is trying to relive her wild days as a mujer soltera, single woman, explained Letitia. And would you believe she was in the store with us today? You're joking, Steve replied. How do you know? I was buying rolls. There was a woman next to me with two young girls. She was standing right next to me. She talked to me. She spoke in English. I'm pretty sure it was her, based on what I was told, Eric added, but I didn't see her. We ran through the whole store into the parking lot, but by then she was gone. He paused. Forget pretty sure. I'm certain it was her. She apparently also said she was staying with someone until she worked some stuff out, right, Letitia? I figured, said Steve objectively. More importantly, what have you figured out for tonight? Letitia pointed to a half-page ad in the Folha, which featured a young woman clad in a bikini. The ad contained that day's date and a headline which blared in big, bold letters, Noite das Mujeres, Ladies' Night. I think that the best place to go was to the Via Madalena, Letitia responded. That's where all the best clubs are. Aren't there a bunch of gay bars there, asked Steve? I don't know why she would hang out in one of those. Letitia looked at him disapprovingly. You'll have to excuse meu namorado, my boyfriend, she said, shaking her head. Apparently he really is un homem velho chato, a boring old man, who doesn't know what people his own age like to do. Os jovens, the young people, frequent the bars and clubs in the Via Madalena section of São Paulo. Oh, they do? Steve asked curiously. Letitia leaned in. Yes, they do, she said in a seductive tone. In fact, before I met boring old you, I used to go to those clubs every week. Well, excuse me, Steve said. Before I met you, I would hang out in the Bexiga area. Sometimes I would go to the Via Olympia neighborhood. There are clubs there, too, you know. True, Letitia replied, reaching out with her left hand to stroke Steve's arm. The Vejo was right. There are places in the Bexiga and Via Olympia, which is really like a downtown where you find the biggest office buildings, sort of like Midtown Manhattan, I would say. She looked at Steve and smiled. But if she really wants to enjoy herself, and she knows the area, she will be in Via Madalena. How far is this area from us? Eric asked. Not far, Letitia replied. It's over on the west side of the city. Without traffic, she laughed. It would be about 15 minutes. So we should give ourselves a half hour to get there. Bexiga is closer to here, Steve interjected. So it's certainly possible she will be in Bexiga. Let's do this, Eric intervened. Let's go to Via Madalena tonight and into Bexiga tomorrow, if needed. Sound fair? Both nodded their heads in agreement. It's settled then, he said, adding, but it's not until late tonight. What should we do now? Letitia thought for a second. I have an idea. She is here with the two girls, right? We need to find some place for kids. They've only been here for a couple of days, so if we can pick out something that people would do with children while visiting here, we may be able to find her. The park, Steve said. That's where we should go. You mean Parque Ibirapuera? I can't even pronounce it now. Ibirapuera, asked Letitia. That's a great idea. Turning to Eric, she explained, he's totally right. That park is a little to the west of us also, a little further south than Bexiga. We basically go the same way, we just need to go down the Avenida 20 and Tres de Mayo to get there, instead of the Avenida 9 de Julio. It's like Central Park in New York. It's in the middle of the city, has museums, things to do for kids. Turning back to Steve, she added, you are a joven muy inteligente, very smart man, mi amor. Sometimes, Steve replied, but don't you forget it, either of you. He stood and walked to the counter, returning with the bottle of wine as he poured everyone a fresh glass. The only question, pondered Letitia, is where in the park they would go. If the girls are as young as I think they are, then they wouldn't want to go to the Museo de Arte Moderna or Museo de Folklore. She rose to retrieve her laptop computer from the bedroom so they could find the park's other attractions. After taking 2 steps, however, she stopped. I know, she said. The planetarium. I used to love the planetarium when I was a kid, Eric said. Exactamente, Letitia exclaimed. Todas las crincas. All children love the planetarium. And with kids who just came here from the Northern Hemisphere, remember, it will be entirely different here, even more interesting. That's where we should start today. Agreed, said Steve. When do you want to leave? So that gives you a little bit of the local flavor for Sao Paulo. The park that I referenced, the name I still can't pronounce after all these months, is just like Central Park. And in it, they have various museums and the planetarium, which actually is the largest planetarium in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's world famous and very, they have a lot of pride for it down there, and that's why it plays into the book well. Any other questions?
Now you said this is all fantasy. It's not made up as part of real life concepts that have actually happened.
How much of you is in the book? They want to know. They need to know.
I've already given you how much of me is in the book. Actually, it's really the. All right, he's an attorney who does divorces, who's Jewish, who's a Yankees fan, who's a Jersey guy. That's all me. I gave you the first chapter is all me, and that's really it. Believe it or not, that's really all it. It's based on, as I explained, that article in the newspaper about the person dying in a car accident. And I just really played with it from there. And it's easy to prove. I've never been to Brazil. No one's ever accused me of murdering anybody. And as I tell other people, at some point when they're in Brazil, they go to a restaurant and eat pasta and drink beer, and I can't eat pasta or drink beer because I have celiac disease. So it couldn't possibly be me because I'd be sick, and then I couldn't do it. I had to go. I should add, by the way, also, since I just mentioned celiac disease, that part of the proceeds from the book sales are being donated to various charities. One of the things I want to do was give back. So there's 3 charities that I've earmarked to get certain funds, assuming I sell enough books to actually have funds. The first one is Hurricane Sandy Relief, which obviously here in New Jersey is big on everybody's plate. Second is the Celiac Disease Foundation. I've been diagnosed with celiac disease now. I've had it for about 7 years. Officially, 2 of my children have it, and it's a very underfunded disease, so that's something that's near and dear to my heart, obviously. And the third one is what's called the CARES Foundation, which raises research money for congenital adrenal hyperstasis, which is a genetic disease that affects various types of people as well. And the reason for that one, so everybody knows, is that their main office is in my office building in Union, down the hall from me. So it was an easy one to say. They're local, so to give to them as well. So there's a charitable element to the book as well. Since I have a day job, this isn't supporting my family time.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me, over the span of 2 years, about 5 months to write the book. I wrote the first 4 chapters in 2012, shelved it for about a year, and then I made a New Year's resolution in September, at the Jewish New Year, to write more, and started writing it in September, again in earnest, and then, as I was explaining before to someone, Hurricane Sandy actually was a benefit for this, in a twisted way, because my office lost power, and I couldn't go to the office for 2 weeks, and it's just my office, so I was able to shut it down and be okay with it. And even though I would go in a couple of times and bring files home and work on them, and I had emails, the rest of the state wasn't really working. The courts were closed, most people weren't working, so nothing was getting done. So I spent a lot of time writing, especially after my kids went back to school, because the power at my kids' school came back on before the power in my office. So I had about a week just to write, and was able to get a lot of it done at that point. But the 5 months is a little misleading, because I didn't really have an editor working with me. So when I do have an editor for the next book, hopefully, we'll go with various rewrites. And actually, I should clarify that too. The next book's already out. It's a different book. I have been blogging for several years on a blog site, and I've taken the baseball-related blogs, and I've put them into a book form with enhanced commentary and updating them. So that's available on Amazon right now as well. It's called Blogging Baseball from the Bench, and it's I think it's interesting personally, and it's available on Amazon now. And there's another one that I've been working on that hopefully I'll be able to get published someday as well.
Are you doing self-publish on all three of them, or?
Well, they're independently published is the buzzword now. This one was independently published. The baseball one was. My hope is to get an actual publisher for the next one, if I can. And then whatever one's after that, of course.
Now we'll get a little bit of a flavor of what it's like to be an attorney, how you experience being an attorney, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact,
That's really cool.
What I do in the book, and I should have mentioned this before, when I started reading before, I quoted from the American Bar Association Canons of Professional Responsibility. I quote half a dozen or more confidentiality clauses in the American Bar Association Canons and New Jersey Bar Association Canons on confidentiality throughout the book. Because basically what happens is he needs to figure out, Eric, what he can do and what he can't do vis-a-vis his conversations and actions with the client to clear his name after she accuses him of murdering her husband. Because everybody thinks that if you say something to an attorney, he or she can't repeat it to anybody. That privilege. For the most part, it's true, but there are certain instances where it's not true. So the book really explores the boundaries, I like to say, of the attorney-client privilege as to when an attorney can protect himself, in this case, or say things that are against the client's interest to protect himself, as opposed to the normal, which is you can't do anything. And an example somebody asked me once was, what if somebody comes in and said, I killed somebody? Well, I can't do anything about that. I mean, I can't report to anybody. That's privilege. But if the same client walks in a week later and says, you know, I killed that guy last week, I'm going to go kill this guy the same way. Now I can say, wait a minute, that's a problem, and call the police if I think it's true, and say, he just told me he's going to do something. There's a provision for that in the rules. So it's not all protected. So in the movies and on TV, sometimes they don't really show that properly, and that's important. That's a thread through the book, and the attorneying, and he consults with other attorney friends of his as far as what he should do and how he can go about doing things. So there's a little bit of a flair for the attorney world in there.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's that aspect of somebody giving an attorney $1 and say, okay, I've just retained you, that gives you my confidentiality.
It does for the most part. It does for the most part. And that, like, for example, if you ever watched The Sopranos when it was on TV, at some point, Tony and Carmela are going to get divorced. And every divorce attorney she calls says, I can't, he consulted with me already. So once you've consulted and you've learned a side of the issue from that one, you can't then represent the other side, absent a waiver. And you have to keep that stuff sacred. But there are certain cases when they come in and they don't even give you the $1. But if they've come to you, theoretically, as an attorney, you can't reveal that information with certain limitations and other ways you can do it based on the scenario. So give it 99% privilege, but there's a little bit that wouldn't be based on the commentary and what happens thereafter based on it.
And what made you decide to look at that confidentiality section as much as you do in this book? Was there a reason?
The reason was, as I explored the possibility of writing the book, it became apparent that if he couldn't use anything that she had said, or he couldn't do anything like that, it would create a bigger issue for him. So it was a way to exploit or explore what people think, kind of turn it on its ear a little bit, and make it work within the concept of the book. And there are books like that too, where and movies and stuff where they take an aspect of something and they kind of play it that way. But it seemed to work well within the confines of what I was doing. Any other questions?
Do we find out why she chooses him to, I guess, be
The fall guy?
Yeah.
No. No, you actually don't. But it kind of, I don't know if it necessarily even matters as the book plays out why it was him. I think it's just because it was easy. And the misperception, again, of the privilege is that if she says something to him or anything goes on between couldn't then repeat it, so she figured she was protected by the whole thing, which was obviously erroneous.
So have you ever met a woman like Bianca in real life?
You weren't here when he mentioned someone.
Yeah. Well, I can say it now. I guess the kids are gone.
Yeah.
There was a woman who came to my office years ago who physically resembled the woman I describe in the book as Bianca. And she didn't retain me, and I don't remember her name even or anything about her, so I can talk about it a little bit at least. And the basic gist of her thing was that she wanted to get a divorce because her husband was cheating on her. And she was actually from, I think she was Puerto Rican, she wasn't Brazilian. But she had the same basic characteristics as far as body type and the long flowing hair and the clothing that was a little too revealing perhaps at times, which she probably used to get favors from people. And because she didn't come back to me after getting some information from me, apparently she was trying to do it with me as well. So that's basically the genesis of it. And then I started writing it and fleshing it out, and everybody says to me, who would play her in the movie, if there were a movie? And everybody says Sofia Vergara is the logical choice. And that's probably, as I was writing it, I almost had that vision in my head a little bit to kind of play it out a little bit more.
So do you think you play the character in the movie along with Sofia Vergara?
The character is loosely based on me. You know, he's not me because he's balding and I have a full head of hair, so it can't be me. If I had to pick, it's funny because I was thinking about that one day. I did a radio interview and I felt they'd ask me that very question. And I think if I had to pick somebody in Hollywood now to play the role of Eric Goldberg, he's not perfect because he's probably too thin, but the guy who plays Phil on Modern Family, Ty Burrell.
Okay.
I think he could pull off being an attorney guy, and he's got that dry wit sense of humor delivery that I think would play well with it. Short of him, I guess I could do it. But I wouldn't be able to inject my own personal life into it, so it might be a struggle.
Yeah, your wife probably would divorce you.
She might, but then if we get enough money for the movie, we can both live comfortably. It's okay. Any other questions before I do get divorced?
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Sit up here.
Hope that's okay. Did my head shine too much? You know, I need these things. You laugh. You laugh.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm sorry. What's that? I'm gonna be all day. You gotta be
Yes, I showed you one of my.
My brother.
And she's an artist herself.
Thanks for coming out. Oh, yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good questions.
So how long has the book been out? Is it
3 months now.
3 months?
3 months. It's been like a slow.
Yes.
Independently published.
John.
It's all my own.
Yeah.
You always want to give 60 weeks lag time. So figure it's like a slow crawl.
Yeah. No, we just tried to help somebody. A friend of ours just wrote. You can kind of see it. You're trying to get the buzz going, right? That's sort of.
Because any buzz is helpful. And then I found actually that people don't come to the thing, if they heard about it at the store, they'll then order the store.
Yeah.
So I've seen an uptick in the purchases, which I have to think is part of the response to that. And then if one agent takes away from the other else, all bets are off the next one.
Yeah. No, I know. I just have to get away from it. You can do it. I mean, one of them, it's kind of depressing looking at the Amazon rankings, but they're not terrible, but given the amount of work he's putting into this, it's like multiple ways.
And I would,
Amazon rankings are fine.
but that's what this reminds me
I can go.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
I'm doing it from 100,000.
Oh wow.
It's in the top echelon. It's a lot harder.
That's really interesting.
That's a lot harder. There's a cluster.
Yeah.
Give that to Daddy.
Lila earned.
Anyway, it would be okay. Give it in the phone call. This is for you?
I like that.
Okay, Mom, you want to go to that?
But I like the one. You know, like this.
How's school?
No, next year's gonna be oh, we're gonna get through all the science credits.
Oh yeah, well that stuff don't have to be like that.
I know.
Oh yeah, but I mean, anybody who's
Good out.
Yeah, I just love.
Want a little bag? Want a bag?
But that's fine then.
But I'm
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out.
Anything?
Let's pick one of these. And
Okay, so how am I making now? ASA?
Only wish I had a computer when I had vegetables.
Ours is so easy. No fault, you know.
That's good,
No
though.
bitching, just get at
sometimes it
it.
doesn't last very long.
Half of those? It's trying to be nightmares.
Really? Ours wasn't. It was just easy. Easy. We both agreed on
I
it.
used to
That's
but
great.
it agreed to, as they said, the American bar.
There's so many that come in, they say this is easy, and it's just brutal.
Back then, they did.
Where's the monster?
Oh,
Okay, that's right, yeah.
oh really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, brutal. Right.
It would take
By the way, the artist who did those collages.
So you're gonna do another fiction?
The one I have kind of done that I tried to sell years ago is a fantasy baseball fiction one.
Okay.
And I have one in my head that's a much darker, legal one than this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That'll work.
One of those that doesn't
I have it churning in my head already that I think I can do it. I'm going to do some short stories because they're easier to write different stories than the short story. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. If my wife lets me.
Well, you know you got a couple of people here that look at it.
Yeah,
Excellent.
but I won't look at your baseball.
That's fine. Yeah, if you want to look at the baseball book, if you like
No.
baseball, you can look at that one too.
Okay.
Where's my box? I'll show you. I got a flyer for it somewhere. No, sorry. I'm a total show.
Good.
What?
There you go.
Thank you. I want to make an out to.
This is to Brent.
Another guy looking like me?
You're a lovely family. I have 3 daughters.
Oh,
How old are they?
One's almost 12, 14, 18.
Okay. So you're at the opposite.
He's got the scenario there where they're all trying to be independent.
Yes.
Another guy looks like me.
You gonna bring any more CDs?
Thank you so much.
All right.
You might have more CDs tonight.
One time I did that. I had a claimant he was like,
I figured I'm not going to get
he was
involved with.
talking about getting on a train, driving to Washington and telling the president.
Wow.
So I sat there and I said, I'm not allowed to talk about this. But I thought there's God's law and there's man's law. And if I keep asking myself, and he did it, I'm involved.
Right.
And I said, I'll go to jail. That's what, you
No,
know.
no,
But
that's-
then maybe I was protected and didn't know it.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like it's even there's various privileges. That's one. There's the priest penitent privilege as well. At the same thing as the priest. So if you go to confession, you say, I drank too much at the same time.
You can't say
You can't say that. But if you say, I'm going to go on Labor Day and drink it again, and I'm going to do it, I told her, you know what? It wasn't fair. Yes, you know, it's going to tell the voters. But yeah, if it's a general, so in your case, no.
I don't even think I told my
If
supervisor.
you think it was realistic, yeah, if you think it was a realistic threat,
Yeah, the man
then you
was
could do it. Then you should, obviously. Yeah.
I just believe my mind.
See that?
I've hidden that because I thought people would come after me or something.
See how it works for me? People just tell me this stuff. No, you're
Thank you,
good. Don't
that's
worry.
so good. This sounds really good. So it's fun.
People, you know, and I'll just say this. I think I told you when I was here the first time. People that read it tell me they like it generally. It's a fast read, they say, which is a good thing. But I've had a couple people tell me don't quit my day job. But and people raise, well, why this or why that? But generally, they seem to really like it. So hopefully they're being honest with me. I tell people to be honest with me because otherwise I can't get better.
Yeah, that's the only way you can.
Yeah.
The thing is that you have such a, your background in law gives you that English concept. You know how to really turn it into words.
Maybe. But it's funny because people will say to me, I'm so impressed. You were there. And it sounds trite when I say it, but it's don't be impressed. I mean, people do things all the time. This is just something that I did. It doesn't mean it's great. I mean, I think it's good. Not, you know, the best author, or not the worst author. But it's just something in me. People do things that amaze me all the time. So it's just something. I will say that hopefully grammatically it's correct. That's what I really gun for there. I mean, I don't want to have any grammatical. I'm like, there is I'll tell you now, there's an egregious error with a fast food restaurant. He goes into a burger thing and walks out with a Big Mac. I have celiac disease. I don't know any better. I can't eat that stuff. so there's a couple of mistakes in it that might have been caught by someone else. But I can live with that. That to me, because I laugh about it, whatever, you know, that's better for me than if there were typos throughout. So I write this blog, and a few of the guys on the blog site had published books. How do you do that? And I realized it was creative space. One of them, the story is really good, but the writing is atrocious. Atrocious typos, syntax is off. And I read it, and I got through it, but it offends me almost as a user of the English language that I don't want to have.
Most people today between the ages of 15 to 35.
This is an older guy. He just wasn't educated to know proper grammar. And again, it's fine. I'm okay with it. But as you're writing, if you use a word perfect or whatever, it's those little squiggly lines underneath for every time you make a mistake grammatically. So part of my editing is making sure there's no lines. Green, red, blue, they're all gone. Hopefully they're all done. Unless there's a reason for it, like the Portuguese could be there, So it's good.
And I also like the idea of, like you're talking about that confidentiality, more about law, but also what it's like to be a lawyer. Like, everything does.
2 words.
Everything probably does in some ways, but like, it's so easy to look from the outside and say, oh, they're this or they're that, and you have no clue what the other people are living with.
Right.
So when somebody puts that into a book, then I get a bigger
a bigger thing, a bigger knowledge of life.
So you were a social worker for how long?
It was Social Security disability. It was a claims adjudicator.
All right, so so what you had to do was the same as what I did, which is half of your job is claims, half of your job is psychology. So what I do on a daily basis is act as psychology. So I have to empathize with them as much as possible. Because if I don't understand where they're coming from, I don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, I can't understand where to take it, especially with divorce. There's so much worse all the time. People come in with these issues with divorce. If I don't get a flavor for who they are, I don't know where to go with it. Because I can say, not every divorce is quick and better, but let's assume I want to treat everyone exactly the same. I can do that if I wanted to, but it's not going to work out for me. Right? So you have to understand the person, understand their motivations, understand the backgrounds and why they got where they got. Same with criminal cases, to be honest with you. Like criminal things, like I don't do heavy stuff, I do light criminal. I have to understand who the person is, sometimes to, not necessarily to know if they did it or not, but to understand where to go with them, to make them understand how to get the best results for them. That I'm not selling them up down the river, that I'm not just doing something to get rid of it, but I'm doing it for the right reasons, and why going forward will benefit them. But without knowing who they are, you can't do that. And I guess any job is like that, but mine sometimes.
So you've been actually an attorney instead of a fixer?
Yeah. I'm a fixer an awful lot too. There's a lot of fixing.
There's a lot of fixing.
Believe me. I say to people, I'm the fixer sometimes. I should say that. Because you have to be. Because a lot of times law is secondary to reality.
Yeah.
And it always comes down to who you know.
That's true too sometimes.
So they're gonna take it to a different chamber of commerce.
Were you a writer before this, or your profession prompted you?
You know what? I always wanted to be a writer. Like I was in college, I was an editor of my school paper, and I always wanted to write and do that kind of stuff. So I graduated law school in '91. And I want to be a sports writer before that, but you can't make money doing sports writing. There's people who make money. So I knew that wasn't going to be so I went for law instead. And my wife got pregnant in 93 or 94. My daughter was born in September, so do the math. And she slept an awful lot, thank God, during the pregnancy. So I was writing. And so I actually wrote a book back then about fantasy baseball, and it's about a fantasy baseball league, if you understand how it works, gone wrong, where a guy actually has a cousin who's a coach for one of the real teams, and has him cause harm to players to affect his league. And I shopped it around because back then there was no internet, there was no computer, so you do a manuscript and mail it out to editors and publishers. And they all said no, well thank you. So I got it back, and it's out on a shelf now for what, 18 years. And 4 years ago I started blogging. Blogging is where it began. Let me blog. And I started off with a couple of fluff things, and I started getting more intense with certain things, and then I was really just trying to have a little bit of fun and do whatever, and I thought, you know what? I can write. I can do this. Some people are doing it. So I started this book, and then I unearthed, believe it or not, the other one in my office. It was on the shelf in my office I hadn't looked at in a while. And I've redone it totally. Still making a couple of changes. I had a friend of mine read it first, and he said, you might want to do this, that, you know, so I'm trying to fix up to make it more polishable at that point. But I've always wanted to do it.
Was it a series of instances or something direct?
There are so many events and occurrences in my life. If I could really write about what goes on in my daily life, it would be more fiction than this in most people's eyes, because it couldn't possibly be true. But this really is a tremendous piece of fiction. But there's so much that goes on that I can go and tell stories go on to all day long about them. In fact, one of my prizes is my youngest is in 6th grade now. 6th grade. In 4th grade, they had what your daddy does for work. So 3 times I went to the 4th grade class in Randolph Elementary School, Shangam School, and spoke about law. The law is boring. So I told stories about law. And when I first started in 1991, I did all insurance defense for a firm. And we represented insurance companies and people in like automobile accidents. The stories you would hear from people were hysterical. And the stories I heard from other people were even better. So I would put those together, and I'd walk out to the standing ovation from the 4th graders each time. So I like to say I kill in the 4th grade. It's perfect. Like there's one about girl works up in Patterson in a Burger King McDonald's, I don't know which one. And behind the scene, you're following. I like that.
I know McDonald's.
And if you go in, and it's like the driveway goes behind, the place. So, girl gets dropped off by her brother, punches in for work. All of a sudden, her siren's outside. Her brother's in a car accident. She's just imagine, I gotta go see what happened to my brother. So, go. He looks out 5 minutes later. There she is being carted off on a backboard in the ambulance. Then she punched in already.
She punched into his workman's comp case.
She was in the car.
Yeah.
She was gonna lie. That was the thing. You know, I once represented people who were in an accident with a Camaro. And it was alleged there were 9 people in the Camaro. 6 adults and 3 children in the Camaro. There's no way. If I made a book about it, people are like, yeah, right. But this actually happened. And the kicker to that one is, my insured had a $30,000 insurance policy. It's like a 9 people and $30,000 to play with, right? Where am I going with this? Well, no, you're wrong. Believe it or not, I ended up paying 2 of them that we could show her in the car, $24,000. That's it. So I saved $6,000 on the policy, and the woman's still mad at me that I didn't save more. Come on, people! $24,000. It's like a great victory. It's a great slam. Still upset. So I can go on forever, literally.
You know how they say when you're in an accident, never tell the truth? I mean, just don't. Okay, I caused an accident in Pennsylvania.
Did they say that?
They do say that. People, it's like, don't talk, don't
They say
say
don't
anything.
talk.
Don't talk.
Yeah, they say don't talk.
Don't tell the truth.
All right, so here's, well, no, I mean, I don't say that, but, you know, if you're, they'll tell you,
And this
all
guy
right, you know what I'm saying.
I do.
So I'm in an accident, I caused an accident, okay? I make a left
That's what
turn
they mean to
after
tell you
the,
that.
I make a left turn after the arrow stopped. And I cause a woman to swerve, miss me, and she gets hit from behind.
Okay.
So when I get out of that car, I go, I caused it. All right? When the cop comes, he says, what happened? And the guy's ready to start talking, I said, it's my fault. And there was nothing else they could have done. You know? My insurance company paid for it. It wasn't big. It wasn't expensive. But would my insurance company be mad at me for telling that truth? I told everybody the same truth.
There's 4 people there, and 3 people are going to say it was your fault, and you don't say anything. It's the same thing. You might as well come clean.
I know, it just felt so much easier.
Yeah.
Nobody was fighting.
Yeah.
We were all friendly with each other. You know, I'm apologizing. I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
It was so much easier. But I'm thinking, did I mess? Would the insurance company have gotten me for that? Nah.
No. You can't lie to a police officer. You can't lie to a cop, really. I mean, so
Well, you're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to, right? You're not supposed to.
You know, this is
People do.
a simple thing. Just last week, something, you know, where you make a left here, come in, and it's got the S thing where you have to merge to one lane.
I don't know, but I understand what you mean.
So I entered onto the red, and there was a police officer there, and I stopped. So he gave me a ticket for not getting out of the lane. Now I've seen like people just come in here today, go through that.
Was it quota day?
Pardon?
Was it quota day? What they do is last day of the month?
On a
Second
Sunday.
last day? The Sunday, that's why I ain't nothing else to do.
But I heard too, you go to court and represent yourself in the touching, and they'll charge you 0 points.
Yeah, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
If you go with a lawyer, it's 200. She'll charge 200.
Here's the deal. You're going to plead down, the best case scenario, to what's called 39, for legal advice, is what I do. 39:4-97.2, which is failure to do something. I don't know what the exact wording it is anymore. And what happens with that is the fee is like $100 and change, $33 in court costs, but there's a $250 surcharge that you pay the state that they can't get rid of. So it's like a $400 ticket at that point.
The lawyer told me she represents me. I only pay Metuchen lawyer. You know, they send you letters.
Yeah, I know.
She said,
now watch out, he's an attorney.
I remember you.
How you
Nice to meet you. You'll only have to pay $2.
Oh, I had to have surgery last week. Didn't see it, but I
The
had
ticket plus versus $450. She said because I know the process.
No, unless they get a different ticket. Okay, ready? There's a different statute. That's obstruction of traffic. Obstruction of traffic. You can go. If you're going by yourself, these are the buzzwords. Obstruction of traffic. That one has no points, no surcharge. You're going to pay whatever 100 plus there is. That's what it must be.
This is not staying in the lane.
I don't care what it is. You can plead anything. You obstructed traffic by not staying in the lane.
Right. So you're saying
obstruction of traffic. That's no points and no surcharge. That's even better.
Well, no, the
if they do
thing
it.
I got is 2 points.
I don't.
Oh, you plead.
He's telling him to
Plead down.
plead it down.
Yeah, that's what you plead down to.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
they're
she's talking
telling
about.
me, like you said, you gotta pay $250, right?
If you plead to 97.2, which is the statute number, it's a surcharge. If you plead to obstructing traffic, which is a different code thing altogether.
Well, the prosecutor would let you do that?
I don't know. You gotta ask. Some do, some don't. Up by me, you need to do a lot more than down here. But that's what makes you have to talk about. Obstruction of traffic, no points, no surcharge. That's the best one you can get. To be honest, that's like the grand solution to that.
And mostly have to depend upon what time of the month it happened.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, there's
This
But
is
you're
what's
saying
going on.
that lawyer really wrong for saying she has a thing with
I'm not
the
saying that.
prosecutor.
They all have a thing with the prosecutor.
No, but she's
All
saying
locals have a thing
you
with
don't pay
prosecutor.
your surcharge, right?
Only, no, not if you plead to that. If you plead to the official no
She
point
probably
ticket.
knows how to, right.
She's thinking obstruction.
Right.
In my mind, that's what she's doing. Because if you plead to that 97.2,
I find it a little